Welcome to Writers Uncut. This is a weekly chat held on Instagram Live with authors Cheyenne Young and Deirdre Riordan Hall. We discuss all things writing and publishing and welcome your questions in the comments of the live video or sent to us online. As writers, we do a lot of editing, and because of that, this show is uncut, unfiltered, and unedited to share the real story of what it's like being in this industry. So welcome to our episode today. I am waiting for Deirdre to join us, and then we will get started. I'm really excited for today because we're going to be talking about rejections, and we're also going to answer any questions that you have. So if you have any questions about writing or publishing or anything, just drop them in the little comment box below and we will get... Okay, Deirdre should be here soon. Hello.
Hi. Hold on, I'm having setup difficulties.
So no worries. So I posted a comment like we read, and I'm supposed to be able to keep it permanently, and it's not working. It's not working.
Oh yeah, I see that. I just touched it and I tapped it and it like glowed.
Oh, I found it. Excellent. You guys are so smart. We're so smart. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for joining us. We have a couple people on here. So I'm Cheyenne Young, and this is my co-host, Deirdre.
Hello. Sorry.
Are you having an earthquake over there?
I am. Okay. Yeah, sorry. My phone is not staying. I have this like little stand. Sorry, that's like an extreme close-up. You don't want that. I have a stand and it's rejecting. It's like this little thing.
Oh, okay. My daughter has one of those.
Yeah, it's like a tripod. That's what it is. And it's rejecting my phone in its case. I think it's too big, but like it wraps around it. But I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. Like this is totally messing up our flow. Oh, way to be professional. Let me grab something.
I'm telling you, you need a pop socket.
I know, I do. I need a pop socket.
You guys, I'm so professional over here. I just hooked my phone via the pop socket across the monitor of my laptop. That way I can see my phone and I can see my computer and we're good to go.
All right. Usually I have like everything set up before I even like press, Instagram, but all right. There we go. Okay.
Yay.
No more earthquake. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway. Oh wow, I see some people that I know on here. Hey Jimmy. Cool. Anyway, so are we gonna dive in? Personal update? Yes,
I have a question from Matt.
Oh.
And then we discussed talking about rejections today, because I have a lot to say about rejections. So should we, I was gonna say Matt's not on here yet. Should we wait and see if he popped up?
He just joined.
Okay, awesome. Hi, Matt. Okay, we are getting to your question now. So here's his question. He says, how much thought do you put into the names of characters? Do you go for normal, unique, try and tie them in with personalities or traits? Thanks. So what do you do?
That's a really good question. So for me, it depends on the story and it depends on the characters. So like ancillary characters, usually I'll just like shout into the room, hey, I need a guy's name. Hey, I need a girl's name. Like my family or whoever's home will just like and so that works for that. But yeah, definitely for main characters, I really feel like I have to connect to the name in some way. And just like naming a child, which if you've done, then like it can't have connotations necessarily from someone in your real life. So like when you're naming your kid, like if you had a friend growing up that you no longer got along with or something, you wouldn't want to name like your main character that. You wouldn't want to name your child that, right? So I treat it this in a similar way. And I definitely like to get like sort of like an Easter egg, like have a little bit of meaning or like a resonance to the theme or like the meaning of the story with the name, if that makes sense. And yeah, I definitely put a lot of thought into that. It's never just willy-nilly, unless it's just like some rando, person in the story.
I'm both. I feel like when I was a brand new writer, and I think this is also because of J.K. Rowling, she does like all of her names have meaning.
Oh my gosh, that's
If
amazing.
you think they don't, just Google the meaning of any name of any
Yeah,
character in Harry Potter, and it all
yeah.
relates to the character. So, I used to think I had to do stuff like that, and then I got really sick of looking up meanings of names. So some of my older books might have names that kind of relate to the character's personality, but now they don't. Now I just pick names that I like. And one of my funniest things is in City of Legends, my main character's name is Macy. And her name is Macy because it took me so long to think of a name for her that in all of my plotting and all of my rough drafting, I called her capital M, capital C, that stood for main character.
Yeah.
So I would say, well, MC does this and MC does that, and then I just started calling her Macy because that's what it sounded like, and because that was just one name that I could never figure out. And now I love it. I think she's a great character. So
Yeah.
now, kind of like in the last few years, my favorite thing is to name characters out after like either fictional characters or celebrities that I like. So you can kind of tell whatever TV show I'm really into at the moment, I copy all their names. Like Sasha Cade is from the girl who plays Allie on Pretty Little Liars. The actress's name is Sasha, and
I
I
didn't
love
know
her
that.
so much. She's so talented. She's so beautiful. I just love her so much that I named Sasha after her.
Yeah.
Raquel from that same book is named after one of my high school friends. So a lot of it really is like I don't put much thought into the meaning of my characters' names. It just has to be a name that I really enjoy and that I really like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then someone pointed out to me a while back that I had 3 books in a row where the boy love interest's name started with an E. And I was like, oh, I should probably change that. So now I have to keep all my E names out because I was like overusing that. So yeah, and it's tricky because it is kind of like naming a kid, only it's more fun. One thing I've noticed, especially if you're writing young adult, and maybe fantasy is different. You're allowed to have unique names in fantasy, but I have noticed like so many young adult books now come out with these weird names that nobody would never actually name their kid. And I'm just like it's a mouthful and it's just not cool. And I think that these authors are like trying to think up the most unique out there name they can, but then every single character in the book is named that. And it's a young adult contemporary. So they all have names you've never heard of. And I'm just like, really? Like, you might be trying too hard, and it really throws me out of the story
Yeah. Yeah.
if the names are too, just for no reason, for no reason. Like, so if it's in a fantasy novel or something, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I try to go for a mixture of like fun names with some regular names. And I do the same thing with yelling out, I need a guy's name or I need a girl's name. And my family is so terrible at it too. Like,
Yeah.
my husband will yell out something stupid, like Scrooge McDuck. And I'm like, no, like, give me a real name.
Like, you're not
So,
on my wavelength right now. I need like like a hero or like a
right,
librarian or
right. And I find that I do the same thing with naming not just characters, but places and things. Like, if my characters walk into a pizza place or somewhere, and you
Yeah.
need a name for it, like sometimes I can spend an hour trying to come up with the perfect name, and sometimes just whatever pops in my head. I'll look around and I'll be like, okay, scissors, tape. We're going to scissors, tape, mall. You know what I mean? So it's like, not that bad, but it's like a lot of my names really are just kind of off the top of my head, and I don't really put much thought into them because I got to put so much thought into writing the rest of the book that I cannot waste that much energy on names. But
Well, when it comes to like places or stores or restaurants, I won't say that I put a lot of thought into it, but I definitely am intentional. And like in real life, I had an uncle who was an inventor and he had like hundreds of patents, and like he was like that was his life. Like he was like an inventor and he did all these things, and it's kind of like a legend in our family. He wasn't famous and didn't like invent anything like notable, like the printing press, but it's just like a thing. And so we kind of have this joke that like I have a lot of inventions, and if I'd ever move forward with them or like restaurant ideas or anything like that, I would be like a billionaire. I'm always thinking up these different things, and like between my husband and I, it's like we have this joke. He's like, "Oh yeah, like let's do it," and then we're like, "Really, you're never gonna do it." But anyway, a lot of the restaurants in particular that come up in my book. So there's like the granola bar, there's Patty's Pizza. Like these are all things that I thought were good ideas, and like probably not, and then I put them in the book. So like not a lot of thought while I'm writing went into it, but it was like in my head anyway. And so, yeah, so I am usually pretty intentional. Like sometimes it's just like I throw something in, especially if it's not going to be like a central place. So Matt then followed up to ask, do you create places or that are real life set or use that are real life settings? Sometimes, yeah, like definitely. But if it's like, so say I'm setting a book in, you know, a small town, I might not use like the actual, say there's a donut shop. I might not use the actual donut shop that's there, but it might be based off of that. Or if it's more like, you know, they're flying to Paris to do some great thing. I guess this is like kind of timely and maybe silly of me to say, but like if they were going to visit a, you know, landmark there, I would use the real setting. But if it's like something small and like really particular to the story, then usually I'll make it up. That makes sense.
I tend to use, I think it's just a lot easier to relate what you already know to what's in your story. So like every single high school and every book I write is based, in my mind, it's based on Santa Fe High School where I went to school. I will often mention that big ugly clock in the main corridor because we had it. And I mean, it's still there the last time I was there. Of course, the last time I was there was a really sad occasion. So I'm thinking of not using that school in my memory anymore because of that. But like every pizza place I go to, every mall, every single thing, like, and these are contemporary novels, every contemporary place I go to, in my head, I'm pretty much thinking of a place that I know, or I invent a place in my head and I go back to it every time. Like I have Magic Mark's Pizza, which as far as I know, the last time I Googled, does not exist. I made that up. And my characters will often go eat there, and every single book I have, they'll go eat there. And so it's like this place I could visualize in my mind that's like half something I made up and half the pizza place I worked at in high school. So I definitely use real life settings to inspire what I'm writing. And, you know, unless my characters are going to like an actual monument, then yeah.
Right.
But like right now in my book, the book that I'm writing right now, my characters go to Dinosaur Valley State Park, which is this very cool park we have here in Texas. And there's a lot of actual fossilized dinosaur footprints in the river and all over the place. So you can go swimming and you can play in them and you can walk in the dinosaur footprints that are there. And I've been a few times in my life and it's always been fun. And so my characters are going there. And I realized I kind of sat down to write it and I was like, I don't know if my memory is good, like clear enough to rewrite this. So I'm actually planning a trip to go visit there. I can't do it this weekend because it's Easter, but next weekend we're going to drive on up to Dinosaur Valley State Park so I can get a good feel of it to write my chapter. So like that chapter will be set actually there and it's called that. It's not just inspired by it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's just so much easier because I don't write books where the settings matter so much as what's happening matters.
Yeah.
So I really just like using what I already know, you know, like especially like with the high schools and stuff. It's like I already know what it looks like and I can picture the different hallways and everything. So like that's how I set my book instead of trying to create a brand new high school from scratch.
Yeah.
It just makes it easier to write and I could focus on the real story and not the settings.
And so I think whatever method you use when you're writing contemporary, I think, you know, when things are based on real life, I actually want to say something about fantasy in a second, but I think it definitely lends to an enriching kind of real sense for the reader when it's, you know, when you don't have to get too like fine detail, but when, you know, when you mentioned like the big clock, like the reader's just going to kind of skim over that. They're not going to like hone in on it, but it adds to like a layer to the story in a way, like in the back of the reader's mind that I think can be really, it just adds to the realness. Like you're in the story, you're in the setting, you're in the character's daily life. So I definitely recommend either basing it off a real thing or really, you know, in your mind, just as you're writing. It doesn't have to take much time, but just sort of like, you know, sketch it out, or when you're doing dishes or whatever, driving to work. Just kind of paint that picture in your mind so that when you're writing, you can add, you know, little details like they stopped in front of the blah, 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 blah to talk about da, 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 da. And like, it roots it.
It makes it more real. Yeah. Right.
And then as for fantasy, really the sky is the limit. I mean, you can do whatever you want. But and I think this depends on your audience and what your fantasy audience is looking for, whether it's, you know, whether it's fantasy or even sci-fi. But I feel like when it comes to settings, And this can even be said of characters and their abilities. Like, again, they have to be rooted in something. Like J.K. Rowling, again, like masterful. Like there's always an explanation for everything. And whether it's overtly stated or, you know, you find out later, or it's just woven into the story somehow, it's not just thrown in. And I'm not suggesting any writers here would do that, but you feel like it's intentional. You feel like when you're reading the book, there's a flow and it's all real and it could be happening in some land. And I think that's accomplished because the author either has written notes for themselves or has spent a lot of time, Tolkien, envisioning this place. And so it comes off authentic as they're writing.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I actually do just throw stuff in all the time, but when writing contemporary, I think you can get away with that.
Yeah. But
yeah.
it's not like you're throwing things in, but it's not like, I think in fantasy it can be dangerous because, like, you know.
Oh yeah.
Because you're creative and you can just like throw, the character can levitate. Well, we don't need like a little sub footnote like why they can levitate. But if that's not authentic to the world that they live in, then do you see what I'm saying? Like,
oh, for sure.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so unless anyone has any other questions, we can move on to talk about rejections.
Yeah.
And namely, I guess I have a gripe that I wanted to gripe about and turn it into a chat topic.
Give us a little backstory.
So I have seen this. So we're all writers, and everyone knows about rejection. Everyone knows you're going to get rejected. Everybody knows it sucks. But I have seen this trend on Twitter lately, and it's been going on for a couple months, and I haven't jumped in because I'm really nice and non-confrontational, and I won't start crap on Twitter even if I want to. I have seen these authors posting lately, guys, don't give up. It actually took me 10 rejections before I found my agent. Or I saw a thread that said, hey, everyone, let's inspire aspiring writers, and let's let them know how many rejections it took you. And everyone posted like under 20. I think I saw one person that said, well, it took me like 25 rejections before I finally got an agent. And I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, either you are all lying or you are just like the top 1% of 1% of queriers, because it's going to take you a lot more than 10 rejections to get an agent. And like, you might just luck out and query the perfect agent with the perfect manuscript at the perfect time. But do not listen to this crap and believe it, okay? It took me 300 rejections before I got an agent. And then after I got an agent, it took about a dozen more rejections to get a book deal. And then after that book deal, I've already racked up 2 more rejections on my next book. So, and I don't have a yes on that one yet, so I'm sure more rejections are going to come in. So, and it's funny because it's like when we started this like 10 years ago, the thing was, it's going to take hundreds and hundreds of rejections, guys. It's going to take so many rejections. Don't give up. And now it's like, the tides have changed and people are saying it might take you a dozen rejections. And I just want everyone to know that is not accurate. It's going to take a lot more rejections. So don't be reading this crap on Twitter and then think, I've had 20 rejections. I suck. I'm never going to make it, because that is not true at all.
Yeah.
Wait until you've received 10,000 rejections, and then you can start to think maybe you're not going to make it. Yeah. Hopefully you haven't had 10,000, Deirdre.
No, but I've had in the thousands, so.
Well, CC Hunter has too. CC Hunter has, if you ever get to see her talk in real life, she will drag out a rolly suitcase that is full. She's kept all of them. She literally has over 1,000 paper rejections. And she does this thing where she like throws them up in the air, and it's really fun. And she's a New York Times bestselling author now, and she's amazing. So you really don't let the rejections get you down, and don't think it's going to take 5 or 10. Like, it's going to be a lot.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought this up, because it's actually something that I think it's very relevant, especially now with social media. Like when Cheyenne and I started in this industry 10 years ago or plus, I think at this point.
Plus, yeah.
It's just a nice, easy way to say a nice
right.
Decade. There wasn't really social media yet. There wasn't this presence. And so we kind of all, were rejected we were just left on our own to deal with it. And for me, I built up a really, really thick skin. And I'm just going to kind of take you back a little bit. my initial querying was all done, typed, but then mailed in. It was before a lot of before agents were taking email queries. And then, excuse me. And then I started doing the emails. And at one point I did count how many I had saved in my folders on my emails. And it's well over 1,000. It's actually towards 2,000. And that was like 3 years ago when I counted. And I have a couple paper ones. And I love that idea, because I think it's really important to see where you started and to see where you are. And, eventually, you'll have this time in the future and you'll look back and it'll all be behind you. And I think that's a really interesting, what CC Hunter does is really interesting.
Yes.
But it's all a journey. And so what I really want to say, a couple things that I really want to say to anyone who's facing that, especially because I've grappled with it so much, and I've only cried like a couple times. And again, that's because I learned very early on that it's not personal. And I think that's really important for everybody to hear. It is not personal. It is subjective. Publishing is 100% subjective. It is not, with maybe a few exceptions, Michelle Obama, they want to publish her book, obviously, because she's, the first lady, but, or former first lady, but, for the rest of us regular people, they just are looking at the story and whether or not they can sell it. And that's really the bottom line. It comes down to how much money can be made. And of course there are other factors as well. It's not that simple, but it's not personal and it's not subjective. And there's one exception to that, and I will get to it in a moment. But I think once you receive, depending on how you query, whether you do them in batches, whether you do like a whole bunch, one fell swoop, whether you have like, what I do is I have like my top agents, and then like my middle ones, and then like the ones that maybe I'm like, well, maybe that would work out. And you just never really know, and because you don't have a relationship with them yet, you're just reading what you read on the internet about them. But I like to kind of evaluate once I've received a bunch, like whether I got comments back or, any thoughts that the agent had. And I like to evaluate like, okay, like, what's going on in my story? What's working? What's not working? Is it craft? Is it, just that the story is not relevant right now? And that's maybe, my pirates book, like, I think it's pretty awesome, but maybe people aren't interested in pirates, like I can't control that. And kind of piggybacking off of that, like what can the experience teach you? Both on the personal level, like as a person who's resilient, and in terms of the story. Oh, Matt's commenting. Okay, he writes, that's one of the reasons why I was so happy to find your channel, because it's a real life inspiration from hardworking published writers. Social media projects faux perfection, and then we all try to achieve that. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
That's why we started this, and that's why we call it Writers Uncut, because there's we want to be real, and we all fall victim to it on Instagram. Like, you want to look successful and happy, and a lot of times you're not. But yeah, and like one thing that you said about rejections, I wanted to get on, because you said like maybe pirates just aren't the thing, and pirates are actually super trendy like a year ago. So maybe agents aren't looking for them right now because they think pirates are going to be played out. You have to wait till it comes back around. So rejections, they're not personal at all, unless you're querying someone that you bullied in high school, and then maybe it is personal. But like, they don't, it doesn't reflect you as a person. It just reflects, it really comes down to the bottom line. Can they make money off of this or not? Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, the only time that it is your fault and you should feel bad is if you make a stupid query mistake, like calling the agent by the wrong name, or sending a bunch of queries in one email and copying everybody on so they can all see, like, it's not personalized, like, dear sir or madam, like, that's your fault and you messed up. So don't do that. Be respectful with your queries. Take your time, research, and just really do the best that you can. Get your query workshopped and reviewed by people, and make sure it's the best that it can be. And then, just keep trying. And I always tell people, and this sounds so sad, I guess, but it's like, the query rejections are the easiest rejections you're going to get in this industry. Like, it only gets worse from here. And you mentioned that it made you cry before, and I was thinking, I've actually only cried one time in publishing, sad tears, and that was when I got my Kirkus review. Like, I read it and burst into tears, and that lasted for like 5 seconds, and then I got over it because I'm not a crying person. But yeah, rejections don't bother me. And it might be because I read a bunch of blog posts that said develop thick skin. And I remember thinking that like poor naive Cheyenne 10 years ago thought that like query rejections was just all it was going to be. Like once you get your agent, you're good to go. But no, you're still going to be rejected in so many ways. And I've said that before. But I had a thought, and of course it just zoomed out of my head. But one other thing I wanted to point out was, and this was, it's funny because I was trying to do the math, and I think I started querying around 2007.
Me too.
So that's been about 12 years that I was writing for longer than that. And I remember Kristen Nelson is a pretty big agent, and she has a blog, and she might still have it. She probably does. I'm not sure.
She does.
And this was like back in 2012-ish. She had requested my manuscript, and I was so excited. And I was reading her blog, and then I got she rejected me. And I was reading her blog at the end of the month, and she did like a monthly recap. And she said this month she had received 1,200 something queries.
Wow.
Of those 1,200, she requested to read 62 manuscripts. And of those 62, she didn't sign any new clients. And I remember being really proud at that moment because it's like, I was one of the 62, and I don't know the math on what percentage that is, but it was a pretty low percentage.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, hey, I got a request, so I'm doing something right. And I was really happy about that, So it's like, you just have to keep trying, and you also have to realize these agents are getting hundreds and hundreds of queries, and, it's not you, it's timing.
Yeah.
And one thing, when I actually did get my agent a couple of years ago, when she called me to offer representation, she said, like as soon as your query hit my inbox, I was like freaking out because I was just talking a few days ago with my fellow agents about how I wanted a story that was similar to this. So it was almost like fate. She kind of had this idea about a character dying and like leaving behind letters. And then I sent her that query in her inbox. It was total fate, and so she signed me in a heartbeat. And I always think like, well, but actually I did have other offers with that novel, but it's like, if my agent hadn't said that, would she have just skimmed right on by my query and maybe she wouldn't be my agent right now? So some of it is fate, and some of it is timing, and some of it is luck. And a very small bit of it is in your control. The only thing you can control is writing a really good book. And even if you write a really good book, that does not mean it's going to get published, unfortunately. So you just really have to keep trying. And don't listen to these people on Twitter that say, oh, it took me 10 rejections. Like, okay. 10 sets of 100 rejections? I would believe. But,
well, good for them, but those of us that live in reality, So I want to say actually tons of things. Like, I didn't realize I had so many thoughts about this. Another thing to really be aware of is if you're in the querying process, is that there are a portion of agents that actually physically, personally read your query, but a lot of them have assistants or interns or whatever that are kind of filtering them. And then they'll pass them on to the agent. So that's another thing to remember. Like, sometimes, like, don't get mad at the agent necessarily because maybe they didn't read it. Maybe it was their assistant, and they're just like, well, they're supposed to be in tune with what the agent is looking for. But that's just another part of the process that's kind of behind the scenes and not often talked about. And then kind of off of what you were saying about fate, in some way, in some occasions, I guess, not getting the acceptance from a particular agent might be a blessing in disguise. You never know. They might be retiring soon, or, unexpectedly, or having a baby, and then, that's going to take time away from, their work or whatever. So I always like to think when one door closes, it offers the opportunity for another to open. And so that's, maybe these are all like little tricks that we use for ourselves to kind of like make it feel okay. Like what you were saying with Kristen Nelson's thing, and but I think that's good. I think that's part of developing a thick skin. That's part of growing. That's part of accepting. It's just part of the process. I saw we got a couple more comments, and I still have more thoughts, but I just want to add. I want to make sure we get to these. So Matt says, the truth is much more inspirational, helpful, and practical than an unachievable goal for a new writer today. Yeah, I think keeping perspective on it is really important. And not getting caught up in the glossy, it only took me 10 tries, Twitter.
And maybe that happens to some people. And like with Sasha, it almost did take, I sent out 20 queries with Sasha, but I had queried my agent, like she was like the 5th or 6th one I did. And so it only took me 5 or 6 queries to get my agent, but that was the 6th book that I had queried.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was almost like it was this huge learning process. And then I had finally written a book and I knew how to write a query and I had my list of dream agents, pared down. And I was like, I know. So it's like, it was kind of, everything was just kind of ready to go then.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my first novel and it wasn't my first try. And, and I'm sure it does happen to some people. I'm sure some people will just write that awesome novel right out of the gate and they get an agent quickly and good for them. But I really hate that I've seen this going around on Twitter lately, is everybody acting like it doesn't take very many rejections. It's going to take a lot of rejections for the average person.
And
So
I think the danger in that is that people might be like, well, I've tried.
yes.
And now I'm going to walk away because it's.
Or they get embarrassed or ashamed, or they think, it's been 30 rejections and I should just quit. And I just really I don't want you to quit. And I want you to, and this, I feel like this is like my motto. I say it all the time, but the time is going to pass anyway. So keep trying, because if you had told me 12 years ago it would take this long to have my book on a shelf, I probably would have been like, okay, forget it. It is not worth it. Like, I'm just going to give up now. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because I was blind back then and I had no idea how long it was going to take. And I just kept thinking each week, maybe this will be the week that it happens, So you really don't give up. And especially don't let people on Twitter make you give up either, because I feel like so much of what I read on Twitter is either an exaggerated truth or a flat out lie, or the exception to the rule, bragging about how they're the exception. So, for most of us, it takes a really long time. And again, look up CC Hunter. She is amazing.
Yep.
If you ever get a chance to see her talk in real life, because she gives classes and stuff, like, she is so great to listen to, and she will bust out that suitcase of rejections. It's very cool. And I wish I'd actually kept all mine, because most of mine, I have a few paper rejections. Most of mine were on email.
Yeah.
And I deleted a lot of them. Like, I would go through and delete them just to clean out my inbox. And now I wish I had them all. So I could print them out, and have a big stack. But
I actually do have, I have a fold, like in all of my, I have like 5 emails, but in all the different emails I have folders with them. So maybe I'll do that someday if I have extra printer ink or something. Beth Rivas is another author who, what you were saying about, you had queried 6 books before actually getting your agent with the 6 books, 7 books. What was it?
It was 5 books, I think. I think Sasha was the 6th. Yeah.
Okay. So, Beth Rivas is another author. She wrote Across the Universe, a great, amazing woman. And she has a similar story where she, wrote X number of books. It was quite a few before,
it was like 10 or 11 or so.
Yeah. And these aren't short stories that any of us have written and that have not passed through the gates, the hallowed gates of agenthood. And so that's another thing too, to keep in mind, like, you can query a book and then you can revise it. You can query it again, not to the same agents unless they say that's okay. But at some point there comes the time to shelve it and then move on, like you did, like I've done, where, you move on to the next book and, you give that one a shot. But I love that you have your motto, and I have one too. And I've Instagrammed it a whole bunch, and it's a variation of this. It's like, you only fail if you quit. So if you give up, then that's in an effect you rejecting yourself. And I think that was what I was going to say before. That's the only time when it gets personal, is when you reject yourself. So, you can feel down, you can cry, you can be upset, you can be mad, whatever the gamut is of emotions that you feel when you get those letters rolling in, and you see it on Twitter, oh, it only took me 10 tries, and you're on number 50 or number 100, number 1,000. You might want to go and get your pint of ice cream or whatever it is, and like feel that and you sit with it and experience it. And then you turn the page and you look at, like, okay, what can this teach me? What can I use from this experience to grow as a writer and as a querier, and potentially eventually as a published author? Because, like Shanna keeps saying, the rejections come from all directions throughout, until you're reviewed, until your book is on the shelves. Like, it's just part of the deal. And
really for forever, because people will be reading and leaving mean Goodreads reviews for the rest of your life, and probably after that. So the rejections never stop coming. And really, another thing I want to say, like, when you said, like, it's time to set a book aside, don't be one of those authors that just latch on to one manuscript and never want to let it go. Because it's okay to say, you know what, I've had 100 rejections, 200, however many you want to say, I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to be working on something else. And while you are querying, you should also be working on another manuscript too. Don't dedicate your whole life to this one book, because it could be that the book's just simply not good enough.
Yeah.
Or it could be that that book, it's just not time for that book, that whatever the plot is, the theme, that's just not trendy. Publishers can't sell it. So don't be afraid to set it aside, work on something else, because you never know. And I hear this story all the time. Authors saying they got an agent in a book deal with one book, and then they were able to bring up their books from the trunk, the metaphorical hard drive trunk, and say, well, hey, I've written these other books, and a publisher will then take it on because now it's time for that book.
Yeah.
So don't cling, to one book for too long. I think that's why I queried so many. Like, my goal was like 50 to 100. I'd send out like 100 queries, but you don't always hear back from them. And if nothing happened of it, then I'd move on to the next book. So I didn't stay on one for too very long. And I'm really glad that I did, because when I wrote Sasha, and you are aware of this, I called it my perfect book. Like, the second I got the idea, I said, this is the best book I've ever written. And I just kind of knew that it was going to be the one that got me my agent. And I knew from day one, and I told you, we have emails about it. And and I feel like all those years of experience and querying and studying the market and researching and working my butt off kind of prepared me for this one manuscript that I wrote that got 3 offers on it out of 20 queries. And I had, out of all 20 queries, 18 of the agents asked to read it. And a few of them wanted more time because they were too busy and couldn't get to it yet. And I had to just reject them because I wanted to sign on with my dream agent. So that all happened. It's like it took 10 years for everything to happen really fast.
Yeah.
So, and if I had just clung to one manuscript saying this has to get published, I have to keep trying, I'm just going to keep getting rejection after rejection after rejection and never move on, then that wouldn't have happened. So, and I think, and it's up to you. There's no magic. I can't tell you after X number of rejections, you need to move on. Just when you feel that book has run its course, always be working on something new, because your next new idea might be the one that makes it.
Yeah. Yeah. Writer Tams wrote, I totally agree. Timing, fate, everything happens for a reason. That kind of fits in with what you're saying.
Hi, Tammy. Yes. I'm glad you could join us, Tammy.
I have one more thought to share, but I want to read Marsh 8696 writes, it's a shame that in these days of such easy self-publishing, it's still so hard to get an agent. Yeah.
I think that might be why I think that might contribute to why it's so hard to get an agent.
Yeah.
Because because it's even harder to sell books now with self-publishing being a thing. So it really comes down to, it's not a matter of if the agent likes you or thinks you're cool or fun or your social media is awesome. Is this a book that I can sell and make money off of? Yep. So especially for agents, because they don't get paid until your book sells, which makes a lot of us feel really guilty, because it's like, my agent worked so hard and she's only going to get paid if this book is going to sell. Otherwise, it was all for nothing. So I think that with the huge surge in self-publishing, it might even be harder to get an agent now.
I think they're more selective. Yeah, definitely. I think publishers are more selective, and so agents have to become more selective. It's like a trickle down. But my last thought about this topic that I think that I have, I may have more, but for now, is once you've gotten your first rejection, whether it's from the agent or whatever, welcome to the club. You are now officially part of the Querying Writer Club, and so welcome. We induct you.
Hey, you wrote a book and you wrote a query and you sent it out there, and that's a big deal, and that's something that a lot of people just say they're going to do and never actually do. And while we're at it, I will post, you guys need to join the Writers Uncut Facebook group, because I will post this hilarious rejection letter. I'm sure I can find it. It's from like the 40s or 50s or something, and it was like this editor typed up this rejection letter to someone, and it was so funny, and I don't remember word for word, but it was like, this was the most pathetic, awful drivel I've ever seen in my life. He just like slams the whole book, and then at the end he's like, if you'll take an advance of $50, I'd be happy to publish it. Something like that. And then it's like, and then you're like, please never contact me again, and then sign his name. And like, that was how this one author's first, I think it was a short story in a magazine or something. That was how this one author's first story was published, was with this just hilarious rejection letter. So I'm going to post that for you guys on the Facebook group to read. And then I've also read, if you want to read some horror stories, I've seen one author had posted a blog when back in the paper query days. She had sent this like long, beautiful query and everything. And what she got back in her return envelope was just the agent had in a red Sharpie written the word no on top of it and mailed it back. And I was like, oh, that's harsh. So like, if you think form letters are bad, it can get way worse, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
So don't let it get to you.
I've actually seen a bunch on Instagram, and they weren't fiction writers per se, but people who, you know, who are notable, like who achieved great things. Like wasn't this specifically, but you know, just books that have become bestsellers. They'll sometimes post their rejection stuff, and it'll be like, you know, this will never see the light of day, like this is crap or whatever, you know, like just so insulting. And and then of course, like, you know, the person's feeling rather smug because their book is about, you know, New York Times bestseller or whatever. You can, and there's probably like a hashtag for it or something, you could look it up, but I want to see the one that you mentioned. That's funny.
Yes, I'll post it as soon as we get done here. I'll post it on Facebook because it's pretty good. It's a very well written rejection. It's just like full of hilarious insults. But yeah, I can't remember what it's called. I'll be able to find it quickly because I look at it all the time because it's hilarious. Yeah. But yeah, so rejections are a thing, and rejections happen to all of us, and rejections happen after you get an agent and after you get a book deal. Yeah. And it's gonna be hard, but you can't give up. And just, you know, it's good to research online because I've learned everything I know from online pretty much. But don't listen to people saying it only takes a handful of rejections before you make it. That does not make you any less of a writer or any less worthy of publication if it takes you 1,000 rejections or more. Yeah. Because like I said, many New York Times bestselling authors have had a ton of rejections. So and it's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on, can we sell this and make money off of it right now? Yeah. So I'm glad I was able to say my piece with that, because every time I see something on Twitter, I just want to go in a rage. But I keep my Twitter very polite. And I think I was pretty polite on here too. Yeah. But yeah, it's like, I don't want to start any online, you know, flame wars, or is that what they're called? I don't know. So I just keep it to myself. But yeah, and that's a good kind of piece of advice for everything. I feel like, don't look at people's online lives and think that you suck because of it. Yeah, and I fall victim to that all the time. And Deirdre knows. I was like, quick, how do I take prettier pictures for Instagram? Because everyone else's pictures are better than mine. And it's like, you know what? My pictures are decent, and I put my heart into it, and I work really hard to really connect with people and not be some fake person online. So I just got to be proud of what I've accomplished, you know. Yep. So everyone can just do their own thing. Don't try to be like somebody else.
Do you? Yep. And I think it's good to have a sense of humor about it. And you know, you're saying, you know, you learned everything you know about the process from online, but online also means us, and that's why it's so important to have a writing community and to have authors. And it can be so isolating, especially when those rejections roll in and you're alone. And it's like, you know, you do start to question, because you know, you change and you're on Twitter, and like people are accomplishing all these things, and you're sitting there like, well, why isn't it my turn yet? It will be your turn at some point. And you know, again, don't reject yourself, and you can tap into our community. And I will wrap this up by thanking you for joining us today, unless you have anything else to say. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join our private Facebook group, which Cheyenne mentioned. It's facebook.com/groups/Writers Uncut group. So make sure you add that group, or you can just search it. But there is, I think, another Writers Uncut. Anyway, you can catch replays and other older episodes. We put them on YouTube every week, or Cheyenne does. And you can just search Writers Uncut and we'll come right up. And please make sure you subscribe. And if you have any questions for future episodes, topics you want us to cover, etc., leave a comment or send an email. And please share this with your friends and use the hashtag Writers Uncut. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Bye.